Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 115 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, well, we're going to step over a stone threshold and meet some very interesting characters. Just who are these Goldberry and Tom Bombadil folks anyway?
And can we come close to answering the question that has befuddled readers for decades? Probably not, but we'll try.
Yeah.
Folks, we'll make our way over to the common room in just a few moments, but first, I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who rarely sings in falling meter, Alan Sisto.
Well, if I knew how, Shawn, I would do it now just to prove you wrong.
I'm sure you would, which is why I said rarely, not never. But before I let you try, we should probably move on. I think it's actually time for the new fan favorite segment, Meanwhile Elsewhere in Middle-earth.
Excellent.
This is the segment where we tell you what else is happening in Middle-earth while we're busy reading the main storyline. And tonight's is a good one, and kind of a long time coming. You know, a few times now in the text, we've seen Frodo act as if Gandalf is going to be here any day now.
That's true. I mean, way back in Chapter 3, before Frodo even left Bag End, he half expected to see Gandalf come striding up through the dusk. And then later in the chapter, the first time that he heard a black rider on the road, he wondered if it was Gandalf.
That's right. And then at Crick Hollow, Frodo considered waiting one day for Gandalf before deciding to leave the next morning. And when he left a message for Gandalf with Fatty saying, "Tell Gandalf to hurry along the East Road." And I think when we got to that in the text, I believe we did say something to the effect of, dude, Gandalf's not coming.
Of course. I mean, having read this book before, we know that Gandalf has been imprisoned in Orthanc by Saruman. Spoilers. And that Frodo will not be reunited with his old friend until he gets to Rivendell. But there is more to the story, isn't there?
Yeah, there usually is. Actually, according to Appendix B, The Tale of Years, Gandalf is on his way, and has been since the hobbits left the Shire. Before, actually. He escaped from Orthanc with the help of Gwaihir the Windlord on September 18th. That's 5 days before Frodo left Bag End. Readers may recall that Radagast had actually only sent Gwaihir to Isengard to bring news of the Black Riders to Saruman and Gandalf.
That's right. He didn't send him there to rescue Gandalf.
Right.
Now, Gandalf actually tells this story to the Council of Elrond, coming up here in a few chapters. He says, "So it was that when summer waned, there came a night of moon, and Gwaihir the Windlord, swiftest of the great eagles, came unlooked for to Orthanc, and he found me standing on the pinnacle. Then I spoke to him, and he bore me away, before Saruman was aware. I was far from Isengard, ere the wolves and orcs issued from the gate to pursue me. 'How far can you bear me?' I said to Gwaihir. 'Many leagues,' said he, 'but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens.' 'Then I must have a steed on land,' I said, 'and a steed surpassingly swift, for I have never had such need of haste before.'"
Indeed, and it was to find a steed on land that Gwaihir actually dropped Gandalf off in Rohan on the following day, September 19th. Gandalf actually came to Edoras in disguise, but he was refused entry.
They recognized the beard.
Right? The Groucho Marx glasses just didn't quite do it.
Oh, man, I'm picturing that. That's hilarious.
Isn't that great? But the following day, he actually did get in, and Grima Wormtongue actually gives us the story later on in the Two Towers in the chapter The King of the Golden Hall, saying, "What aid have you ever brought, Stormcrow? And what aid do you bring now? It was aid from us that you sought last time that you were here. Then my lord bade you choose any horse that you would and be gone, and to the wonder of all you took Shadowfax in your insolence. My lord was sorely grieved, yet to some it seemed that to speed you from the land the price was not too great."
You know, I always wondered about that. I mean, if he didn't want him to take Shadowfax, why didn't he just say, "Take any horse that you would, except for Shadowfax"?
I think they just assumed that nobody would have the cheek to actually take Shadowfax, right? I mean,
well, yeah, or the ability, because as we learned that he had to tame the horse himself.
That's right.
He had to follow him for several days before he was able to tame him on the 23rd. Now, that's the same day Frodo left Bag End. And the very next day, he did indeed ride in haste because he crossed the River Ison the next day. On September 27th, which is the second day that Frodo and his friends spend in Tom Bombadil's house, that's where we'll be next week's episode, Gandalf will be crossing the Grey Flood. Now, you should go into your books and check out all the rivers on your map to get an idea of the distances being covered.
Yes, you should.
He's actually going to be making it to Crick Hollow in just a few more days on September 30th.
And yet it's on September 26th, the date we're on now, and the first night that Frodo spends in Tom's house, that Frodo will see Gandalf's escape in a dream, actually a few days after the event took place. But we'll be getting to that soon enough at the end of our discussion today.
That's right. But first, speaking of dreams, we have a couple of clarifications, an amendment, a modification, revisals. Shawn?
I'm going to file this first one under amendments.
Yeah.
And as you can probably guess from my co-host's expert segue about dreams, this one is about Frodo's dream at Crick Hollow, which we discussed in episode 110. We heard from a couple of our listeners that, well, we did a good job pulling out some deep symbolism in the dream and making some connections to the Beowulf essay and the story of Tuor. But some folks reminded us we failed to mention one very obvious detail and point of connection, actually, to something else in this book that we've already read.
You know, sometimes that happens. We dig so deep and we just forget all about the surface. And that's what happened
Classic
here.
case of that. Absolutely. Yeah.
We did not see the forest for the trees here. In Frodo's dream, we were told that Frodo saw before him a tall white tower standing alone on a high ridge. A great desire came over him to climb the tower and see the sea. He started to struggle up the ridge towards the tower, but suddenly a light came in the sky and there was a noise of thunder. And that's where it ends.
But as two of our listeners, Maria in Serbia and Tanya in New York, both pointed out, this language is strongly reminiscent of the language from the prologue to The Lord of the Rings about the white towers of the Aemon Barad, or the Tower Hills in Eriador.
Right.
Specifically, the tallest of those towers, Elastirion. The prologue says the towers shone far off in the moonlight. The tallest was furthest away, standing alone upon a green mound. The hobbits of the West Farthing said that one could see the sea from the top of that tower, but no hobbit had ever been known to climb it. Now, we did mention the White Towers in that discussion, but we absolutely did not mention this very obvious connection to the description of the tallest tower of Elastirion.
Right.
So that's a great catch, and thank you both.
Yeah, and seriously, Maria, Tanya, thank you. You're two of our longest listeners, and we really appreciate your help on that one. Great observations from them. Maria also pointed out that although no hobbit had ever been known to climb the tower, Frodo would have wanted to do so in his dream in order to see the sea, the sound of which had troubled him before. And Tanya followed up by adding that Elastirion could be the same allegorical tower that Tolkien mentions in the Beowulf essay. She says, "This is when I got the idea, and I love this, that the tower is an allegory for ennoblement. Frodo's dream is really a foreshadowing of the whole idea of the ennoblement of the ignoble." Now, Frodo, who in the end becomes the most ennobled of the hobbits, has a desire to climb the tower, to become ennobled. But the process is fraught with danger and suffering. That's the thunder and lightning. His desire to see the sea is the desire of the final stage of the ennoblement process, passing into the west, where the true light still resides. Man, those are great insights, so thank you both.
They really are. Thank you so much, Maria and Tanya, and I know who I'm coming to next time I need a dream interpreted. But one more thing before we start. Both Tanya, again, and also Trotter in the UK caught me in another little misstatement in that same episode that I'd like to correct.
Clarify.
Clarify. There you go. I mentioned that in early editions of The Lord of the Rings, Mary had prepared 6 ponies, not 5. But I used that as an opportunity to make a joke about expensive first editions. Now, both Tanya and Trotter pointed out that it's not just the first edition that has the 6 ponies. It's actually editions up to about 2004. Trotter said, one of you guys probably has an edition with 6 ponies in it, and he's absolutely right.
I think we both do, yeah.
I have multiple editions with the 6 ponies in them, and I did know that. I was just trying to make a silly joke, and I said something very misleading. I should know better than to try and be funny.
Yes, you should. Neither one of us is
You're not here to be funny, Marchese.
That's right. Well, neither one of us is quitting our day job yet, that's for sure. Now, folks, finally, before we move on to our chapter discussion tonight, we want to thank Jordan Ellis Rennells for once again sponsoring this week's episode.
Jordan is a musician, composer, and music teacher, and Tolkien reader. Just as we've spent a lot of time exploring and analyzing the themes of Tolkien's works, Jordan has invested time in understanding the way Howard Shore composed the scores for the Lord of the Rings films.
And he's looking to take on new music students from anywhere in the world for piano, drums, guitar, or any other fretted instrument for Skype-based lessons. Now, he's also looking for folks who are interested in studying music composition.
Now, Jordan has spent years devising his own methods and explanations in music theory and relates the technical concepts back to real life and human emotions.
That's right. So if you play an instrument, or if you're interested in studying music composition with an experienced composer and music teacher, or if you just need some sound design or scoring done for a project of your own, be sure to visit www.learntolisten.net.
And be sure to let him know you heard about him here on the Prancing Pony podcast when you reach out. Once again, that's www.learntolisten.net for Skype-based music lessons or to study music composition with Jordan Ellis Rennells. And we'll be sure to put a link to his site in our show notes and social media posts.
Thanks, Jordan. And now let's enjoy a nice meal and a good night's rest in the company of Tom and Goldberry in the House of Tom Bombadil.
I can't wait. I need a nice meal and a good night's rest.
Yeah, the only problem is I feel like a good steak, and I don't think I'm going to get one here.
Not a lot of meat in the Bombadil house.
No,
it's true.
No. Yeah, we'll come to that later. But
yeah,
for now, I'm going to go ahead and start, as we so often do at the very beginning. It is a good place to start.
Always.
And I'm going to read the first few paragraphs here. The four hobbits stepped over the wide stone threshold and stood still, blinking. They were in a long, low room, filled with the light of lamps swinging from the beams of the roof. And on the table of dark polished wood stood many candles, tall and yellow, burning brightly. In a chair at the far side of the room, facing the outer door, sat a woman. Her long yellow hair rippled down her shoulders. Her gown was green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew, and her belt was of gold, shaped like a chain of flag lilies set with the pale blue eyes of forget-me-nots. About her feet, in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware, white water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthroned in the midst of a pool. "Enter, good guests," she said, and as she spoke, they knew that it was her clear voice they had heard singing. They came a few timid steps further into the room and began to bow low, feeling strangely surprised and awkward, like folk that, knocking at a cottage door to beg for a drink of water, have been answered by a fair young elf queen clad in living flowers. But before they could say anything, she sprang lightly up and over the lily bowls and ran laughing towards them, and as she ran, her gown rustled softly like the wind in the flowering borders of a river. Boy,
man, that is
a vision, isn't it?
That is
amazing.
Absolute vision. Yep.
Yeah. Tremendous stuff. And we start immediately with that liminal language we've been noticing lately. The last chapter ended with it, and it starts with it now.
Yeah, you get a really clear connection back to that previous chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And we get, starting with, like you said, the wide stone threshold right at the beginning. And then we come into this room, and man, there's just so much focus on the natural materials of the room is what I noticed in the room's description.
Yeah, absolutely.
The wood and the stone and candlelight.
And even the description of her clothing is done in a way echoing nature. The green is not just the green of a British racing car. It's the green of young reeds, right? It's not the silver of swords. It's silver like beads of dew.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is compared to something in nature if it's not something in nature itself, like the earthenware and the water lilies. Mm-hmm. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I would say when it comes to Goldberry, everything about her description has some sort of water imagery in it.
It does.
She is surrounded by this element of water, and her hair rippled.
Yes.
Her gown was green as young reeds. Reeds are a plant you find in
by
wetlands.
The river, right?
Yeah. Beads of dew. The flag lilies patterned on her belt. She's enthroned amidst this pool.
Yeah. That's a scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
These big earthenware vessels and water lilies
lilies floating. I know. That's so cool.
So it looks like she's in the middle of a pool. Amazing visuals.
Yeah.
I know we're going to touch on this later, but it does make me wish that we'd seen this in a film adaptation at some point. Just because the visual would be so amazing.
It would be so amazing.
Has the potential to be so amazing.
It has the potential to be amazing, but when you think about it, like, man, who plays Goldberry? I mean,
oh yeah.
Who can play this character? Who can play Tom Bombadil for that matter?
I can't. I would not even begin to know.
Yeah. So,
but there's such a powerful moment here in terms of her welcome,
mm-hmm.
Which is the next paragraph that I'm not going to read. She's talking about laughter and being merry. She introduces herself as the daughter of the river, and acknowledges their fears. Now that's interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The admonition not to fear.
Yeah. Shut out the night. Fear nothing. Tonight you are under the roof of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah. There's a reason why you don't have to fear. And it's not because of her. It's because of Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a cool thing. Yep.
They're really, I have to say, even though we'll see something later that really distinguishes her from like an elf queen, for instance. We'll see a very explicit reason why this is very different than that. There is this sort of fairy-like presence here, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I mean, it's fairy-like, but as we'll see in the next paragraph that I'm about to read, it's not elvish,
No.
and we'll talk about that in a minute. But one thing that occurs to me, one of the ways it's not elvish is that we associate elves with nature, certainly, but elves are also otherworldly,
Mm-hmm.
and Tom and Goldberry are so worldly. They're just so so part of the natural world.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, we'll see in the passage that I'm about to read how the effect of meeting her is different from the effect of meeting an elf.
Yeah. Okay, so let me go ahead and have you read that passage then.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read that now. The hobbits looked at her in wonder, and she looked at each of them and smiled. "Fair Lady Goldberry," said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved with a joy that he did not understand. He stood as he had at times stood enchanted by fair elven voices, but the spell that was now laid upon him was different. Less keen and lofty was the delight, but deeper and nearer to mortal heart, marvelous and yet not strange. "Fair Lady Goldberry," he said again. "Now the joy that was hidden in the songs we heard is made plain to me. O slender as a willow wand, O clearer than clear water, O reed by the living pool, fair river daughter, O springtime and summertime and spring again after, O wind on the waterfall and the leaves' laughter."
That tells us a lot right there, but it doesn't tell us enough, does it?
No, it doesn't. Still a lot of questions.
It still really leaves the questions, but I guess this is probably as good a place as any to start talking about, well, who is Goldberry?
Yeah, what exactly is a daughter of the river?
There you go. I mean, she tells us who she is. She's the daughter of the river, so there's your obvious answer. But what does that mean to be the daughter of the river?
Well, and yeah, I mean, and we've seen there's all this water imagery.
Oh, yeah.
But she doesn't throw a sword at anyone to make them a king. So she's not a watery tart.
No,
but
throwing swords.
Yeah.
Bad foundation for a system of government.
Very bad foundation for a system of government. But no, there actually is an interesting observation that Hammond and Skull pointed out. Back at the Tolkien Centenary Conference in 1992, there was a paper given by a Miss Deirdre Green, and she pointed out a great deal of symbolism in Goldberry and her surroundings that's worth mentioning. She said, "The dwelling has low roofs, indicating simple humility. It is filled with light, suggesting spiritual good. The furnishings and the candles are of natural materials, connoting rural closeness to nature. Her chair, far opposite the door, suggests a throne in a reception hall."
And she goes on to point out more. She says, her gown associates her with lush young vegetation. Her belt is the gold of purity and sovereignty, but it celebrates in its floral design the eternal cyclical triumph of nature. She is encircled by water and flowers, symbols of purity and fertility. As a whole, the image asserts Goldberry as a queen or a local deity whose power derives from nature.
Wow. And we've gotten lots of questions about Goldberry from our listeners. Almost as many as we've gotten about Tom Bombadil, actually. And we'll cover these over the next couple of episodes. But, the most straightforward, and I think the one that I'd like to bring in right now, actually came to us from Kimber N. in Portland, Oregon, who asked, who and what is Goldberry? What does it mean that she is daughter of the river?
Right.
What is her relationship to water, to rain, to plants? What are her powers? Does she have a realm of influence, a role, a task? And we will be talking more about this for the next 2 weeks, but it appears to me, just based on the imagery that we see, and though there is a lot of general nature imagery associated with her, when you look at some of the really specific language, the water language that we see, it really does seem like she's a kind of water spirit, or even, maybe like a water nymph or something, with a special relationship to the water cycle of the forest. And I would say not just the river, but the rain, the mist in the valley, everything. Now, unfortunately, as with everything regarding Goldberry and Tom Bombadil, it's just not that simple. But
no, you're right.
But I think that's a place to start.
It is. Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind is maybe a naiad or something greater, but similar in nature. Tolkien does give us some insight, though, in letter 210. Now, this is that fabulous letter that he wrote regarding the Zimmerman script, which is an absolute must-read if you've not read it before.
It truly is. It's a lot of fun.
But in reference to this particular passage regarding the Old Forest and Goldberry, he says, "We are not in fairyland, but in real riverlands in autumn. Goldberry represents the actual seasonal changes in such lands." So there's one really explicit explanation, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's the part I struggle with, because when I see the descriptions of Goldberry, I mean, obviously that's what Tolkien said. I want to take Tolkien at his word. But then when you look at Goldberry and the role she plays in this chapter and the description of her, it really does seem specific to water, not the seasons in general. But we'll talk about some of this as we go through.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I know we'll touch more on it later, but I wonder if that's more related to who she is in her nature, not her role. I mean, in other words, her nature, because she's the river daughter, she's going to naturally be associated with water. Right, she's going to be watery. She's going to be a little wet, you know? But she represents the seasonal changes. So I wonder
from a literary perspective, maybe she represents the seasonal changes.
And so if we were there in winter, maybe we would see her in a different form. I mean, she'd still be related to water, but it might be
maybe she'd be snow.
Ice and snow and things like that.
That's interesting.
And a different kind of rain, perhaps, in the spring. Maybe she takes the summer off. I don't know.
That makes sense. That's a good way to reconcile those two ideas. I like that.
Yeah. Well, you know, every once in a while. What do we say? Blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then.
Even a broken clock.
There you
twice
go.
a day. No, that's good. I'll go with that. And I think as we continue to read through this chapter over the next 2 episodes, I think we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. That might be a good baseline to pull from. But let's go back to the passage you read. We talked a little bit earlier, and I want to explore it more now, this idea that the enchantment is similar but really quite different to the same experience one might have when exposed to elves. What's the word here? It's less keen and lofty.
Deeper and nearer to mortal heart.
Yeah, and then I love this, marvelous but not strange.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
I think it's closer to man. It's not elvish.
Yeah.
I think it's just another way of saying it's not elvish. It's closer to men
earthy.
and hobbits.
It's earthy.
Ooh, I like that. It's earthy.
Yeah, in the most literal of senses, you know. It's grounded.
Mm-hmm.
It's grounded here in Middle Earth. You know, the elves, they don't want to be here. It's certainly not the Noldor, right? We're thinking of the high elves who are always wanting to get back, and so to them, Middle Earth is almost a place of exile. They're eventually going to leave and go back to Aman.
Right.
Goldberry and Tom belong right here.
Right here in Middle Earth, right here where they are in Middle Earth.
Not in the valley
not
of the
Middle Earth
river
in general,
Windle.
but this spot specifically. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's probably why that sensation is so much more. I'm trying to pick another word.
It's more relatable, I think.
There you
to
go.
Frodo. You know, I think he
it's
relates
more present.
To it
it's more here and now.
Yeah,
and it's more mortal, even though there's every indication that neither of these two people are mortal.
Right, yeah. But it's not otherworldly. You know, they are down to earth. They're close to the earth in a way that hobbits are close to the earth.
Absolutely. I also love the fact that we don't see this, but in the passage right after you finish the song, we get Frodo overcome with surprise to hear himself saying these things. How many times we run into that, huh? This idea that
words kind of coming out of his mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. We're starting to see that more and more often. I feel like we need to kind of mention that as a theme or maybe a secondary theme.
We probably should make that one of our themes that we track. Yeah. You know, inspiration, words being put in your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we did see it a lot in the first age, and we're starting to see it more and more in Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
More than I remembered. You know, I didn't, when we saw it in the first stage, I thought, well, there's something we don't see much in the Lord of the Rings, but I'm wrong.
It's one of those things, once you're keyed into it, you just start seeing it everywhere. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's this other thing that we didn't read, and it was really hard because I'd want to read the whole chapter.
Wouldn't it be great to read this whole chapter if we could?
Wouldn't it? This chapter in particular, there's so much there, but her observation, and I love this, I'm going to read this one line. I see that you are an elf friend, and she's talking to Frodo. The light in your eyes and the ring in your voice tells it. You know, we talked about elf friend back in Three's Company when Gildor declared Frodo to be an elf friend, remember?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and he kind of, bestowed this status upon him. We talked it before with, when Bilbo had this status placed upon him. And
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to see here that now this is something that is detectable in Frodo now. There's a change that's come over him that someone with the right kind of eyes can actually see. He doesn't have to show his elf friend card. People can.
Oh man, I don't carry that
in
in my wallet. My membership number is.
You got to get the key fob because then
There
it's
you
always
go.
with you. Yeah.
I'm waiting for it to come out as an app so I can just scan my phone.
Yeah.
Elf friend right here.
The elf friend app. Scan my barcode. I'm an elf friend.
Well, it'll just show up in wallet with all your other, like credit cards.
Now give me my free meatballs.
There you go. I just want that free honey mead,
Yeah, right. No kidding.
So, but yeah, you're right. It's something that now somebody with the right ability, it's probably not going to be everybody, but certainly somebody with the right ability can tell from physiological differences in Frodo that he is an elf friend. That's fascinating. Well, before we move on, I'm going to mention something that I shouldn't mention. I thought it was interesting that they couldn't take their eyes off of her. I mean, here the text says, their eyes followed her, for the slender grace of her movement filled them with quiet delight. I should probably just leave that with no comment, right?
You picked up on that too, didn't you?
Yeah. It's kind of hard not to.
Oh, I'll comment on it.
Oh, no, I know. I'm just saying I don't want to get in trouble. But yeah.
You're checking out Tom Bombadil's wife, guys. Come on.
I don't think they realize she's his wife yet.
Maybe not.
I mean, longtime domestic partner, apparently.
Maybe they thought she was his daughter, like in that
the BBC special.
That one adaptation, yeah.
Oh, man. Tolkien with the multiple exclamation marks. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You didn't read this closely.
Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys just got here. Don't.
Get your eyes off. Look away.
Right,
look away.
Right. Come on, guys.
I mean, we tease a little bit. I mean, I do think there is this.
I think it's.
They're
much
taken
more
by her
wholesome
physical beauty. They're taken by her physical beauty, of course, but it's not like they're ogling her.
No, it's much more wholesome than that. She is beautiful as nature is beautiful.
Exactly.
As water.
They are not
in autumn
undressing
is
her
beautiful.
with their eyes.
No, they are certainly not.
This is not.
No, they are certainly not. They're
not busting out their issues of like Nature magazine.
No.
They found in their dad's treasure chest.
No, they are not. They are just admiring. Not even admiring. I think they literally cannot take their eyes off.
No, it's almost like a spell. She is beautiful like nature. I mean,
there's a fairy entrancement to this. Enchantment.
Exactly. You mentioned the idea of nature and the idea of the beauty of nature. I get that. You're out there in a beautiful location like this, let's say a river valley in a forest, and you just can't take your eyes off the natural beauty that's there.
Right.
Now, in that case, it's literally trees and rivers and sunsets and clouds and things, and it's not a personification of those things. So yeah, I said that because I thought it was kind of funny, but we had to at least show
believe me,
I noticed innocent.
I noticed the same thing. I was like, guys, come on. No.
Come on, man. Yeah, good stuff. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to her explanation of Tom's nature. So I'm going to pick up just shortly after that. Fair lady, said Frodo again after a while, tell me, if my asking does not seem foolish, who is Tom Bombadil? He is, said Goldberry, staying her swift movements and smiling. Frodo looked at her questioningly. He is, as you have seen him, she said in answer to his look. He is the master of wood, water, and hill. Then all this strange land belongs to him? No, indeed, she answered, and her smile faded. That would indeed be a burden, she added in a low voice, as if to herself. The trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in the land belong each to themselves. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master. There you go.
Man, I love that passage.
Isn't it? It is such a rich passage. But depending on who you are, you might find that a little troubling. In letter 153, there's a Peter Hastings. I think a lot of folks have read this letter and are familiar with it.
Yeah.
So Peter Hastings was the manager of a Catholic bookstore in Oxford, and he had expressed some concern to Tolkien that the way Goldberry said he is was too similar to the way God describes himself as I am that I am. And here is Tolkien's wonderful response. He said, "As for Tom Bombadil, I really do think you are being too serious, besides missing the point. Again, the words used are by Goldberry and Tom, not me as a commentator." He then goes on to say that Goldberry and Tom are referring to the mystery of names. You may be able to conceive of your unique relation to the Creator without a name. Can you? For in such a relation, pronouns become proper nouns. But as soon as you are in a world of other finites with a similar, if each unique and different, relation to the prime being, who are you? Frodo has asked not, what is Tom Bombadil, but who is he? Now, we and he, no doubt, often laxly confuse the questions. Goldberry gives what I think is the correct answer. We need not go into the sublimities of I am that I am, which is quite different from he is. She adds as a concession a statement of part of the what. He's master in a peculiar way. He has no fear and no desire of possession or domination at all. He merely knows and understands about such things as concern him in his natural little realm. He hardly even judges, and as far as can be seen, makes no effort to reform or remove even the willow. I love it. He goes on to say some more things. I'll try to keep this short because I've already made this longer than it should have been. but he says, I don't think Tom needs philosophizing about and is not improved by it.
That's one of the classic quotes.
It's such a great line. And he does say what he represents a little bit.
It won't stop us from doing it, by the way, in a couple of episodes.
Absolutely it won't. That's what you listen to.
I just want to put that out there in case anybody's thinking, oh, no, are they not going to? Yeah,
we're not going to philosophize about him. We're going to philosophize about him, but it won't improve him.
Right.
Tolkien's right about that.
That's exactly right.
And he goes on to say, I kept him in, and as he was, because he represents certain things otherwise left out. I do not mean him to be an allegory, or I should not have given him so particular, individual, and ridiculous a name, but allegory is the only mode of exhibiting certain functions. He is then an allegory or an exemplar, a particular embodying of pure natural science, the spirit that desires knowledge of other things, their history and nature, because they are other and wholly independent of the inquiring mind, a spirit coeval with the rational mind and entirely unconcerned with doing anything with the knowledge. Great stuff.
That is really great stuff. And I think we need to come back to that in a few episodes when we do start philosophizing about Tom. But I'm glad you brought it in here because it's so informative. I mean,
yeah.
Going back to Goldberry's answer and this Hastings' interpretation, that it sounds too similar to I am that I am.
Right.
I think he's just really reading way too much into it. I think
you did.
The way I read this, and I think that your reading of the passage was perfect, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think Goldberry's just being very literal in answering the question. Who is Tom Bombadil? Well,
that guy over there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
the
who he is. He didn't ask what is Tom Bombadil. That might be a longer answer. But who is he? Well, he is. And that's the only answer. As Tom says later on when he's asked the same question.
Yeah, you're right. Who are you without a name? Right.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing that comes across in a good reading of the text that, maybe when you're looking at it in your book, you won't pick up on. You might try and give it more weight, like he is or something like that.
He is.
Right. Right. He is that he is or something. But no.
Yeah, that would have been a little too on the nose. Yeah.
It would have been. And it's not that. It's just, hey, who is he?
No.
He's that guy. He's
just
this guy,
Tom's just this guy,
Right. I would also reference in regards to the idea that does come out. It is one of those common, reader theories is, the idea that Tom Bombadil is Eru.
Right. Which kind of goes along with the idea of I am that I am.
I am that I am. Exactly. Yeah. It's actually said very specifically in letter 181. Tolkien makes it very clear that, and I'm quoting from Tolkien here, there is no embodiment of the one, of God, who indeed remains remote, outside the world, and only directly accessible to the Valar or rulers.
There you go.
So, while we might not be able to tell you conclusively who Tom is today,
or any other day,
we can certainly say that he is not Iluvatar.
That's right. Absolutely. But we do get that further explanation from Goldberry. That's good. He's master. He's master of wood, water, and hill.
I love that.
I love how she distinguishes that mastery from ownership.
Yes.
Back in episode 74, when we talked about a warm welcome from The Hobbit, you did this philology fair segment about the words master and king. And that really does, I have to say, bring a lot of light to Tom's relationship to his land, to this land. Back then we said that master, a word with Latin origins from magister, meaning director, chief, or teacher. And it frequently had a connotation of a tradesman, like a master smith or a master tailor,
Right.
or of an academic, like somebody with a master's degree.
That's right. Yeah. And I remember we contrasted it with king, which is a word that's more closely connected to a people, of which Thorin was our example at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other defining characteristic of king in feudal society was that he owned the land that he ruled.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the distinction we get here with Tom. He doesn't own the land. He's not a king. He really is a master.
Right. And there's so much in Goldberry's little aside that it would be a burden to own this land.
Oh, isn't there?
And
I love how she said that almost to herself.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
You can almost see her touching her chin like, oh my goodness. Wow.
Boy,
what a terrible thing.
Right, exactly. Like she's suddenly realized, wow, that would be a burden if that were the case. Like she's never even thought about that possibility before.
She probably hadn't, yeah.
She probably has not, because I just don't think Tom and Goldberry think about those kinds of things.
No, it's not their nature to think that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how much this title of master aligns with his role. You know, is he more of a, you know, as you said, sort of a director or teacher of wood, water, and hill than a lord? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I guess we'll find that out as we go along. And though I said we weren't going to read everything, you're actually picking up exactly where I left off, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I am. A door opened, and in came Tom Bombadil. He had now no hat, and his thick brown hair was crowned with autumn leaves. He laughed, and going to Goldberry, took her hand. "Here's my pretty lady," he said, bowing to the hobbits. "Here's my Goldberry, clothed all in silver green, with flowers in her girdle. Is the table laden? I see yellow cream and honeycomb and white bread and butter, milk, cheese, and green herbs and ripe berries gathered. Is that enough for us? Is the supper ready?" "It is," said Goldberry. "But the guests perhaps are not?" Tom clapped his hands and cried, "Tom, Tom, your guests are tired, and you had near forgotten. Come now, my merry friends, and Tom will refresh you. You shall clean grimy hands and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks and comb out your tangles."
I love that. And I love how you were able to really read that prose in the rhythmic, sing-songy way that we've been talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it really just comes off the page. You know, I think
it does.
If you read it closely, you really see it. It just come out that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's probably a good time to talk about this, because in our last chapter episode, I did promise to elaborate on this in this episode. You know,
gotta keep your
the
word,
poetic
man.
meter of Tom's singing and his dialogue. As I said not last episode, episode 113, it's almost entirely what's called a falling meter. Each metric foot is made up of a stressed syllable, followed by one or more unstressed syllables. So, you know, the example from last time, "Hey, come, merry doll, dairy doll, my darling." The stress on the first syllable in each one of those little feet. Mm-hmm. It's primarily, but not entirely, a trochaic meter. Now, that's fancy word for one stressed syllable followed by one unstressed syllable.
Okay.
Interestingly,
if you say so, as you probably expected me to say somewhere in there.
Interestingly, this is where it gets really cool. Trochaic meter, and specifically trochaic tetrameter, is the meter associated with the Finnish Kalevala. And longtime listeners know that myth cycle, I guess you call it, was a big inspiration to Tolkien. Mm-hmm. And this trochaic meter has a kind of chanting quality that's really clear in Tom's dialogue. And it does sound odd to us as native English speakers, because, as I think probably anybody who's ever taken a high school English class knows, the vast majority of English poetry is written in rising meter. You know, we all learn in school that Shakespeare wrote an iambic pentameter, which is a rising meter. Interestingly, actually, Shakespeare did occasionally use trochaic tetrameter, this chanting kind of meter, for magical characters, which I think is fascinating, like the witches in Macbeth and the fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
You know, your reference to the Kalevala makes me think of a quote from Tom Shippey that he made in Author of the Century. He says, talking about Tom, "He is a kind of exhalation of the earth, a nature spirit, a highly English one, cheerful, noisy, unpretentious to the point of shabbiness, extremely direct, apparently rather simple, not as simple as he looks. The fact that everything he says is in a sort of verse, whether printed as verse or not, make him seem not an artist, but someone from an age before art and nature were distinguished, when magic needed no wizard's staff, but came from words alone. Tolkien may have got the idea from the singing wizards of the Finnish epic, the Kalevala, which he so much admired. By the way, I think the Singing Wizards would be another good band name, just right there.
Totally, yeah, I would go see them. I might follow them on tour, the Singing
Wizards. Absolutely,
yeah.
Man. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And as always, a really cool quote from Tom Shippey. There actually is a character in the Kalevala named Vainamoinen, who's actually is a wandering old wise man who defeats his enemies with magical songs. And I have, unsurprisingly, heard Tom compared to that character many times. So there you go.
Okay, there you go indeed.
But that is not all that I want to say about Tom's poetic meter. Now, as I said earlier, his dialogue is primarily trochaic, but not exclusively. To my ear, I hear occasional dactylic feet breaking up the trochaic meter. Now, that's one stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllables. And you'll hear some of these as we continue to read this. But what that does is by breaking up this chanting kind of 1-2 1-2 trochaic meter with this 1-2-3 1-2-3 dactylic meter, it almost gives Tom singing a hopping quality or a skipping quality. It's the kind of rhythm you might sing cadence to while you're, I don't know, hopping through the forest like a madman. So,
well, yeah, I can see that.
It's really cool that his meter it kind of speaks to who he is and just sort of the, this chanting kind of magical quality to him, but also with the skipping, and it's lovely. I love his verse. It's so great.
It really is. You were able to explore it a lot more deeply than I could, though. So
I am a nerd for poetic meter. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. It's like putting together math and literature, which is
okay. Yeah.
You wouldn't think would be a mix, but it works.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. I love the face palm that Tom does here. The realization that, don't. I mean, this is,
Oh, yeah.
You guys have been, I don't know, almost eaten by a tree and almost drowned by a tree. And yeah, so, let's clean your hands and comb out your tangles even.
Yeah.
But, they do go ahead and they get refreshed. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up right after that. Before long, washed and refreshed, the hobbits were seated at the table, 2 on each side, while at either end sat Goldberry and the master. It was a long and merry meal. Though the hobbits ate, as only famished hobbits can eat, there was no lack. The drink in their drinking bowls seemed to be clear cold water, yet it went to their hearts like wine and set free their voices. The guests became suddenly aware that they were singing merrily, as if it was easier and more natural than talking. At last, Tom and Goldberry rose and cleared the table swiftly. The guests were commanded to sit quiet and were set in chairs, each with a footstool to his tired feet. There was a fire in the wide hearth before them, and it was burning with a sweet smell, as if it were built of applewood. When everything was set in order, all the lights in the room were put out, except one lamp and a pair of candles at each end of the chimney shelf. Then Goldberry came and stood before them, holding a candle, and she wished them each a good night and deep sleep. Now, before we discuss that, I wanted to touch on one other thing that we kind of glanced over. We didn't read the passage about them getting into that other room.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting because they get into this room and the text says it seemed to be a penthouse.
Yeah.
And just a brief little bit of word nerdery on that I'll actually take, believe it or not. I'm not going to let you have all the fun. Tolkien's just using the archaic form, and the original form meant an outhouse or shelter built onto the side of a building having a sloping roof.
Yeah.
So sort of a sunroom or, an addition to the house,
Yeah, I think it actually, I think the etymology comes from, it's like appendage, it's like something that's actually built onto the side. Yeah.
Right. Appended on. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and move on then to the dinner that we just described. I love that they're eating as only famished hobbits can. That's wonderful because you can imagine what that must be like.
Yeah, they have quite an appetite. Let's just put it that way.
It's double fisted, I mean, they are just going at it.
Yeah.
But
and as you mentioned,
you go ahead because I think you're going to say what I was about to say, huh?
No meat. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
They're serving, vegan and vegetarian dishes. Vegetarian, not vegan, obviously, if they're going to have cream
True.
and things like that.
Yeah,
so
that's
just
true.
vegetarian.
It sounds
But yeah,
delicious, all of it.
doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, definitely sounds tasty.
Yeah. It's interesting how these characters that are so close to nature, we're not counting the hobbits, they're pretty close to nature, but
True.
these real kind of primal spirits, they're vegetarian. That's interesting.
I also wonder how many creatures really wander that deep into the wood too. I mean, there may be.
Oh, that could be. You think it's maybe they just don't get animals to. I can't see Tom hunting though, even if he did.
No,
have access
you're
to
right.
animals.
I can see him bounding around.
You see Tom out there with a bow and arrow.
He wouldn't even know how to hold it. No,
just the sound of his singing would scare away any deer.
Well, and don't they talk about him kind of like coming around the corner like tree trunks or something?
Yeah.
How do they put it? Yeah, so they describe Tolkien describes him as not quite tall enough for one of the big people, but he made noise enough for one, stumping along with great yellow boots on his thick legs, charging through grass and rushes like a cow going down to drink. So yeah, he's gonna have a hard time being a stealthy hunter.
I don't see stealthy hunter. Yeah,
not at all.
Not one bit.
Stealth -3. Oh, you're wearing your hat? -4.
Right. Well, and the singing too. I mean, I'm sure that's stealth -8.
Well, yeah, I think at that point it's just you'd have to roll a natural 20 just to have somebody look the other way. I mean, you're not gonna.
Right.
It's just not gonna happen. But interesting. They're vegetarians, and again, just like Beorn was. I thought it was interesting that the water, which seemed just like nice, cool water, turns out to be has some sort of enchantment on it and sets them singing.
Yeah, went to their hearts like wine. But wasn't. Yeah.
No. Well, or at least didn't appear to be. It was some sort of maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was a little moonshine there. I don't know. I mean, it's clear. It looks like water. That's all I'm thinking.
I think they might notice when their throats were on fire.
Were on fire? They didn't see the still outside the penthouse?
Right. If anybody is going to make moonshine in Middle-earth.
It would be Tom. You're right.
It would totally be Tom Bombadil.
Totally Tom. Of course it would.
But yeah, and this idea that singing just becomes more natural than talking.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine that. I can't imagine personally ever finding singing more natural than talking. To the point that I don't even like musicals because I'm like, they would just say those words. Like, who sings? Who walks around singing? There'll be no singing here.
No singing.
But Father,
I'd rather just. I mean, after a few drinks,
I guess
singing becomes pretty natural.
Does it really?
Too natural.
I have to take your word for it. You know that.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the person, I suppose, but yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Well, we've talked before about how heroes sing in Middle-earth,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Aragorn and Legolas singing at Boromir's funeral.
And truly really singing, not just reciting poetry,
Right, because music is a part of this world. And part of me wonders if, maybe this cold water, this enchanted cold water it is sort of lowering their inhibitions in a way that, that alcohol might in our world.
Well, right.
More wholesomely. But, it's just kind of like breaking down those barriers that prevent. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's kind of breaking down those barriers that prevent them from seeing the music of the world. Maybe.
And this just came to me, but I'm beginning to think, I know we have certainly agreed that Tom is not Iluvatar, and I concur with that 100%. But, we do talk about how ancient he is and how far back his beginnings are.
Mm-hmm.
This makes me think more and more that he does, in fact, go all the way back to being an Ainu, because music is how the world came into being. So for somebody like Tom, music is the very center of existence. It is how things came to be.
Mm-hmm.
So no wonder that in his world, singing is more natural than talking. And somehow this water ties that in.
I definitely see where you're going with that. And I do agree that the importance of music to Tom Bombadil and the importance of music to the creation and Arda and Ainulindale, I think that there's a connection there. I personally am not sure he's an Ainu for reasons which we'll probably get into.
Well, that actually is probably jumping to. I just got a little premature there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're thinking about. I mean,
it is, and we'll be talking about this for a number of
ideas
episodes
as we go. Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to land anywhere conclusively until we say goodbye to Tom on the Barrow Downs. Yeah,
and I think it's going to be a lot of stuff like this. Like, is he not? And maybe in 2 episodes I will have come to something different. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, it's there's definitely something to the importance of music to Tom. Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then, of course, we get this wonderful smell, the applewood. Have you smoked anything with applewood?
I have, yeah.
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 It's a wonderful
I've used
smell, isn't
chicken.
it?
It smells fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, it really
it's
does.
Sweet, and it's just got this fragrant, it's just really nice and fragrant. Yeah. Very light and sweet. Yep.
It is.
Great with chicken and pork.
Yes, I was going to say applewood smoked bacon. I've had ribs that have been applewood smoked. Great stuff. Not that they would have ribs and bacon in Tom's house, but
No,
that would be a good fire.
But they're enjoying but they're enjoying the smoke.
Might as well, absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about a moment of fellowship, though. I guess the way the hobbits are kind of made to feel at home. Given footstools and everything. I mean,
even though Tom is the master and Goldberry is this powerful water spirit, they're serving the hobbits, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of get the sense that, man, they're treating these guys like family.
Yeah.
And that's
here,
so cool.
Have a seat. Let me bring you a footstool.
Yeah.
Let's light a fire. Let's get everything taken care of for you. It's beautiful. It's kind. It's just generous and hospitable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe because Tom is not a king, is not a lord, he does not own this land.
Yeah.
Maybe that relieves him of any desire to appear to have authority over the hobbits,
Right, exactly. You're in my land now.
Right. You get none of that.
No, none at all. It's really neat. Goldberry's goodnight is interesting. We don't read this paragraph before your next reading, but she does say that nothing passes door and window here save moonlight, starlight, and the wind.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an interesting thing left unsaid there. The idea is that you don't need to be afraid because only these things get through. But there are probably other things that would like to pass in.
Huh. That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Why would you be afraid if those are the only things around? Well, those aren't the only things around.
Yeah.
But don't worry, those other things can't get in.
Those other things can't get in. They might be outside, but they can't get in.
That's right. And so I think there's a little bit of just a very subtle reminder in what is unsaid that makes you realize there are fearful things in the area, in the neighborhood.
That's interesting. That's an interesting light and dark contrast there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love the description of her departure. Again, there's just so much comparison to water. The sound of her footsteps like a stream falling gently away downhill over cool stones in the quiet of night. It's beautiful. And
man, that sounds like a greeting card, doesn't it?
The sound of your footsteps is like a stream falling gently away downhill.
You try that. Well, you and I can't try pickup lines anymore, but I was just going to say we should maybe have one of our listeners try that pickup line and see how it works.
It might. Let us know.
The sound of your footsteps is like a stream. What? Just stop. Just stop.
If it doesn't work, you never heard it from us.
That's
if it
right.
does work, congratulations. Yeah. Invite us to the wedding.
There you go. I don't think we're going to have to worry about any invitations anytime soon, Shawn.
Probably not.
For so many reasons. In the meantime, before we get too much further aside, I'm going to have you read the next section here. I call this The Late Late Show with Tom B.
That's my favorite show. I stay up late every night.
That opening monologue is always great. A little wacky, but great.
He sometimes puts himself to sleep, though.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
All right, here we go.
Tom sat on a while beside them in silence, while each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to ask at supper. Sleep gathered on their eyelids. At last Frodo spoke. "Did you hear me calling, Master, or was it just chance that brought you at that moment?" Tom stirred like a man shaken out of a pleasant dream. "Eh, what?" said he. "Did I hear you calling? Nay, I did not hear. I was busy singing. Just chance brought me then, if chance you call it. It was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you. We heard news of you and learned that you were wandering. We guessed you'd come ere long down to the water. All paths lead that way down to Withy Windle. Old Grey Willow Man, he's a mighty singer, and it's hard for little folk to escape his cunning mazes. But Tom had an errand there that he dared not hinder."
Man, there's that rhythm again.
Yeah. Almost every sentence he speaks.
Everything he says. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Frodo asks this wonderful question about, essentially, was it just chance? Was this coincidental? And we get that wonderful line again that we hear so often in Middle-earth. Just chance brought me then, if chance you call it. If chance you call it.
Yep. And we've used that so many times on this show.
Oh, yeah,
I think people know, where we come down on it.
We're kind of hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer on that one. But that,
a bit,
that is the recognition of fate, the recognition of the hand of Iluvatar working to accomplish certain things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that Tom says it was no plan of mine.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it couldn't be somebody else's plan.
That's exactly right.
Which is interesting. But it's he doesn't say it was an accident. He just says it was no plan of mine.
Right. He didn't say it's not a plan. It just wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
But he was waiting for him. Now that's interesting because how did they hear the news? Who told them? We learned you were wandering. We guessed you'd come this way because all the roads lead to Rome. In this case,
or Withywindle in this case. Yeah.
Yeah. But and we'll find out in the next episode. This is not really a spoiler that it was Gildor,
right?
That got the news there. But my goodness, that really reveals a lot about who Tom is. That he's connected in so many ways to get that information.
He kind of seems to know everybody around here, really.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly knows Farmer Maggot, as we'll talk about later on.
And lots of people know him, as we'll see when we get to the Council of Elrond.
Yeah, they may not know him by that name, but they certainly know of him under other titles.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, obviously, we know this because we know the story, but Frodo's errand is important enough that people are sharing news about it,
Yeah.
When Gildor passes, when Gildor sees Tom, he's going to tell him, hey, there's this guy, Frodo Baggins, he's wandering through here, just FYI. He doesn't say go look for him, but he just says, hey, this guy's going to be around, he's wandering.
Yeah. And Tom thinks to himself, well, he'll eventually find his way here because that's what happens.
All paths lead that way, so I guess I'll meet him soon. I'll get my autograph book ready.
And if he doesn't, if Frodo's able to escape these paths because he's strong enough, that's kind of the implication here. It's hard for little folk to escape his mazes. So in theory, it's possible, but Tom knew it wasn't likely and that he would find him. Very interesting.
Right.
But of course, his errand was what brought him to that area, not Frodo's call. And that errand is what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to pick up just part of the verse here. I'm going to read the second half of that first section. And he says, each year at summer's end, I go to find them for her in a wide pool, deep and clear, far down Withywindle. There they open first in spring, and there they linger latest. By that pool long ago I found the river daughter, fair young Goldberry, sitting in the rushes. Sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating. And I can, he would sing it quickly, I think. He would actually sing it, though, which I'm not going to do. I like you guys.
Probably
I really like every one of you as our listeners, and I want to keep you as listeners.
Too much to sing for them.
Yeah.
At least in this episode. It's not like we've never been subjected to
Oh, no, we've
each other singing before.
Yeah. Just not made up tunes, I don't think. I think we'll probably leave that.
Yeah. We're not Rob Inglis.
So it's summer's end. No, we're definitely not in so many ways. It's summer's end, and we know the date. This is September 26th, though indeed it is just a few days after the transition into autumn. And there is where he's gathering water lilies for Goldberry. It happens to be that where he gathers them is where he found her.
Yeah. Every year at this time.
Yeah, every year at this time. So what do you think about the fact that when he found her, sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating?
I have wondered about that one a lot.
That last line alone makes me wonder whether perhaps prior to that she didn't have a corporeal form that was, animated, that was I guess human, for lack of a better word, even though she's not human, anthropomorphic form that actually, had a beating heart. And now she does. I don't know. I may be reading more into that. That may just be metaphorical.
It almost seems like it could be the opposite too, though. And her heart was beating then when I met her.
Oh,
as though maybe it's not now. And I don't mean she's dead. I don't mean she's dead. I mean that she's become something other than. No. I mean she's become something
Goldberry.
else.
Would that be the coolest Halloween costume though? Zombie Tom and Goldberry.
I'm sure somebody's done it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Somebody must have done it. No. I mean, I don't mean she died. I mean she became something more. She became a spirit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But then
I hadn't thought about
that just raises the question: what was she before? I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
because she definitely was some kind of water spirit before, as we'll see when we we actually have a clip from their first date, don't we?
Oh,
Which
yeah, you're
we'll
right.
bring
We
up in just a
do.
minute.
Shawn, you've got that one ready to go, huh?
Yeah, I can actually go to it right now. Yeah, their first meeting is actually described in the poem The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and I'll read a few stanzas of that now.
Okay.
Old Tom in summertime walked about the meadows, gathering the buttercups, running after shadows, tickling the bumblebees that buzzed among the flowers, sitting by the waterside for hours upon hours. There his beard dangled long down into the water. Up came Goldberry, the river woman's daughter, pulled Tom's hanging hair, in he went a-wallowing, under the water lilies, bubbling and a-swallowing. Hey, Tom Bombadil, whither are you going? Said fair Goldberry. Bubbles you are blowing, frightening the finny fish and the brown water rat, startling the dab chicks and drowning your feather hat. You bring it back again, there's a pretty maiden, said Tom Bombadil. I do not care for waiting. Go down, sleep again where the pools are shady, far below willow roots, little water lady. Back to her mother's house, in the deepest hollow, swam young Goldberry, but Tom he would not follow. On knotted willow roots he sat in sunny weather, drying his yellow boots and his draggled feather.
Interesting, I will say. I can't say that sounds like the best first date. I mean, it just doesn't seem like this was love at first sight. Know what I mean?
Well, it seems better than Melkor and Goliath's first date, but that's a low bar, I suppose.
Yeah, seriously, that's a really low bar. Now, it does seem, though, that the second date went a little better. Later on in the poem, we see them decide to get married. But one day, Tom, he went and caught the river daughter, in green gown, flowing hair, sitting in the rushes, singing old water songs to birds upon the bushes. He caught her, held her fast. Water rats went scuttering, reeds hissed, herons cried, and her heart was fluttering. Said Tom Bombadil, here's my pretty maiden. You shall come home with me, the table is all laden. Yellow cream, honeycomb, white bread and butter. Roses at the window sill and peeping round the shutter. You shall come under hill, never mind your mother. In her deep weedy pool, there you'll find no lover. Old Tom Bombadil had a merry wedding, crowned all with buttercups, hat and feather shedding. His bride with forget-me-nots and flag lilies for garland was robed all in silver green. He sang like a starling, hummed like a honey bee, lilted to the fiddle, clasping his river maid round her slender middle.
That's lovely. I really like that.
Yeah.
Then again, I always cry at weddings, which now I'll never be invited to anybody's wedding who's listening to this.
Yeah, definitely not, because they're going to think you're going to break out in song and poetry and then start crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the above, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting that the passage you read talked about her heart. Her heart was fluttering.
Yeah.
Just like in the book, it says her heart was beating. So
her heart was beating.
I still don't, she definitely was some sort of water fairy, water, naiad, water sprite, whatever,
right.
beforehand.
And took on some physical form here.
So I don't know, the heart thing, maybe he's just talking about how it was racing when he says
right.
it was
it may just be the metaphor for, exactly.
Yeah.
She was feeling in love there, having a little physiological reaction.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, he caught her, right? I mean, she'd caught him, and then he talked his way out of that one. And now he catches her, holds her fast, and basically says, you're going to come with me. It's not quite ale levels of aggressiveness, but it's probably a little less acceptable in modern parlance to do
there's
this.
There's definitely... That's really interesting. I can't disagree.
No.
He's definitely kind of a take charge.
He's forcing
kind
the
of,
issue here, isn't he?
I don't know if he's forcing.
I know.
He's taking initiative, certainly. But
there you go. He's definitely.
I don't know.
He
grabs around her middle and.
Yeah. No, I mean, clearly she has time later to decide, because the wedding is not the minute he captures her. He captures her, says, you're going to come back with me, and then there's a merry wedding, which she could have clearly have just said, no, thank you.
Well, but it is an interesting contrast to some of the, let's say, some of the sort of supernatural couples that we've seen in Middle-earth.
Yeah.
You look at something like Thingol and Melian, where Melian really kind of lured Thingol in, and I don't mean that in a
not
like,
in a bad
like
way.
It was kind of a nefarious thing. Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. It's just she really kind of had control of that situation.
Yeah, you're right. She did.
Whereas this Tom is really in control here.
Tom is very much in control. I mean, that's why the first date didn't work. Is she tried to take charge, and he's like, no, I don't play that way.
Yeah,
you go back home.
Yeah,
and then he comes and gets her again later, and it's like, now you're coming with me now. Don't stay at home with your mom. You're never gonna find a lover there.
You're never gonna find a lover that way. I'm here. Look at me in my hat. Yeah.
See, you like my hat. There's your Far and Away reference right there.
Yep.
Oh man, never thought that would come up again.
Never
because the first time that reference came up, I couldn't remember the name of the movie. Remember, it was like, oh, what's that movie with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman?
Tom Cruise and
he was
Nicole
Irish,
Kidman,
and they were And of course, I had like 27 people within an hour of the release say, "Dude, it was
Far and Away."
It was Far and Away.
It's totally Far and Away. Yeah, we'll never forget again. That's really interesting stuff. This is an interesting relationship. It really is.
It's a very interesting dynamic.
I really like this little window into it that we get.
Yeah, I like it. Well, we're not going to read Tom's follow-up song, but he then basically says, hey, this is a good thing for you that I still had this errand because I'm not going to be going that way again until next year.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he says, nor shall I be passing Old Man Willow's house this side of springtime when Goldberry dances down the path to bathe in the water.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that Goldberry takes more than one bath a year. I'm just saying that, but I mean, really.
Maybe she only bathes in the river water once a year.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, since she clearly likes water. In fact, some might say she is water. Who knows?
Some might say that.
Yeah. Some might say, but yeah, she takes one bath a year, whether she needs it or not.
Yep.
So we're not going to read Frodo's asking the question about, tell us about the Willow Man, which is really a phrase that nobody should ever utter. But Merry and Pippin are like, no, let's not.
Tell us about the Willow Man.
Yeah. Please, Mr. Tom, tell us about the Willow Man.
No, don't. Merry
no, I will not.
Say, no, do not.
It is nighttime, and
we would like
rest.
To sleep tonight. Thank you very much.
I can just imagine now the cut. Like you're looking at Frodo asking this question, and Tom Bombadil looks, like, all right. And the next thing you know is like the wide open eyes of Merry and Pippin at 3 a.m.
Right.
Can't sleep.
Well, and I hate to get ahead of ourselves, but we will see their dreams are.
Oh yeah,
their dreams are a bit post-traumatic.
They are a little bit. In fact, we are going to get there. I know you said you didn't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that's really where we're going next. I mean, I guess the only observation to make is that they barely got into bed and their heads hit the pillow and they're out.
Yeah.
And they go straight into dreamland where you're going to pick up.
Before we do that, there's one thing that I spotted in here, and I don't know quite what to make of it. Maybe this is just something to kind of file away as we're thinking about Tom.
Sure.
Tom is called an old man here.
Yes.
And I don't know, just because it happens right after the discussion of Old Man Willow, I wonder if that, I could be reading too much into that, but I wonder if there's an intentional contrast between those two. Like, is Tolkien setting up an opposition between
Old Man Willow,
Old Man Tom, and Old Man Willow?
I think there's something to be said there. I don't know. It's interesting. It's not capitalized like Old Man Willow is. So
that is true, and he's not called Old Man Bombadil or anything like that.
No, he is called Master. There are a couple times where here Frodo even says, "Tell us, Master."
Yeah.
I don't know.
Something to think about as we move forward and talk more about as we start to come to some conclusions about Tom.
As we start to get near the neighborhood of thinking about the possibility of conclusions.
Possibly speculating on the possibility of venturing into the realm.
That makes me think of the Hitchhiker's Guide, right? The very thought hadn't begun to speculate about the mere possibility of crossing my mind, I think.
That sounds right. Yeah, that's in my head somewhere.
Yeah, great stuff.
All right, well now, let me get to Frodo's dream here. In the dead night, Frodo lay in a dream without light. Then he saw the young moon rising.
I see the young moon rising. I see a black wall of rock.
Oh, man.
Pierced by a dark arch, like a great gate. I see the young moon rising. Okay, I'm going to actually edit that whole thing out, I'm sure.
Please. Under its thin light there loomed before him a black wall of rock, pierced by a dark arch like a great gate. It seemed to Frodo that he was lifted up, and passing over he saw that the rock wall was a circle of hills, and that within it was a plain, and in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone, like a vast tower, but not made by hands. On its top stood the figure of a man. The moon, as it rose, seemed to hang for a moment above his head, and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it.
Mm.
Up from the dark plain below came the crying of fell voices and the howling of many wolves. Suddenly a shadow, like the shape of great wings, passed across the moon. The figure lifted his arms, and a light flashed from the staff that he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. The voices wailed and the wolves yammered. There was a noise like a strong wind blowing, and on it was borne the sound of hoofs, galloping, galloping, galloping from the east. Black riders, thought Frodo as he wakened, with the sound of the hoofs still echoing in his mind.
Well, it was totally inappropriate for me to get a Creedence Clearwater Revival reference in there, but it was fun. So, yeah, Frodo's dream. I mean, clearly this is Moonrise over Isengard.
Yes.
And in case you're not sure yet.
Not romantic at all.
No, not at all. Not the kind of dream you'd look for. Nope. But in case you're not sure yet whether this is actually Isengard in the dream, let's compare it to the description in the Two Towers when Aragorn, Theoden, and company ride up to Isengard after Helm's Deep. A great ring wall of stone, like towering cliffs, stood out from the shelter of the mountainside, from which it ran and then returned again. One entrance only was there made in it, a great arch delved in the southern wall. Here, through the black rock, a long tunnel had been hewn, closed at either end with mighty doors of iron. They were so wrought and poised upon their huge hinges, posts of steel driven into the living stone, that when unbarred, they could be moved with a light thrust of the arms, noiselessly. One who passed in and came at length out of the echoing tunnel beheld a plain, a great circle, somewhat hollowed like a vast shallow bowl. A mile it measured from rim to rim. Once it had been green and filled with avenues and groves of fruitful trees, watered by streams that flowed from the mountains to a lake. But no green thing grew there in the latter days of Saruman.
Yep, that's a pretty clear comparison. And
yeah,
there's actually even more a couple of paragraphs later where it says, describing the tower itself, it says, "To the center all the roads ran between their chains. There stood a tower of marvelous shape. It was fashioned by the builders of old, who smoothed the ring of Isengard, and yet it seemed a thing not made by the craft of men, but riven from the bones of the earth in the ancient torment of the hills. A peak and isle of rock it was, black and gleaming hard. 4 mighty piers of many-sided stone were welded into one, but near the summit they opened into gaping horns, their pinnacles sharp as the points of spears, keen-edged as knives."
Wow.
And that, you talk about the tower in Frodo's dream.
Yeah.
In this dream, this tower in this dream.
Yeah, the black tower, not the white tower. We're just being clear here.
Frodo and his many tower dreams. But yeah, this vast tower not made by hands.
I think we've now answered the question of which are the two towers. And people always ask, well, are the two towers Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul? Are they Barad-dûr and Isengard? Are they, Orthanc and Barad-dûr?
That's an interesting thought.
So now I'm kidding. I don't
not
think.
Seriously, I know.
No, I'm not seriously. Not at all. Not even close.
Well, I mean, I think Orthanc is one of them usually.
Yeah. It's Orthanc and Barad-dûr, but the idea
Elastirion is nowhere near where anything would be.
No, it's the two towers of Frodo's dreams, but no. So we get clearly the vision of Orthanc. We get the man on the top of the tower, of course, is Gandalf. Gwaihir coming to take him away, which had happened 8 days earlier.
Yeah,
but the hooves,
September 18th.
Or hoofs, I should say, were on this very date.
Not hooves or hoofs or
hoofs. The Black Riders crossed the fords of Isen on this date, so you kind of think like that's maybe a different timeline. He's seeing what happened 8 days ago, and now he's seeing what's happening now. The Black Riders crossing the fords of the Isen.
Yep, that's right.
Well, next up, we've got Pippin's dream, and I'm not going to read that, but we do need to see that he has this kind of creepy dream about willow trees. He hears this tip tap squeak.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it starts pleasantly. It starts out as as a happy dream, and then it just suddenly
as
turns,
so many bad dreams do.
so
They
often
start
they
out
do,
good, and then they
Yeah.
go really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
He all of a sudden he went from feeling like he's in the house with maybe willow trees outside to now he's inside the willow, which of course he had just been a few hours before. So it's not a surprise that that's in the forefront of his subconscious.
And I would expect him to be a little bit post-traumatic about it.
I mean,
he
of
was
course.
nearly
He was swallowed
whole,
by a tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this because we're going to compare it to Merry's experience. Pippin sat up and felt the soft pillows yield to his hands, and he lay down again, relieved. He seemed to hear the echo of words in his ears. Fear nothing, have peace until the morning, heed no nightly noises. Now, do you remember who said that?
That was Tom, wasn't it?
He says...
I was trying to remember if it was Tom or if it was Goldberry.
He says, heed no nightly noise, fear no gray willow. Goldberry herself, of course, had said, have peace now, heed no nightly noises, for nothing passes door and window here save moonlight. And so, so it's both of them. It's clearly have said something along those lines. So he hears in this case Goldberry's lines, and we're going to hear the rest of Goldberry's lines in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and read the next bit through the end of our section tonight. Actually,
all right.
It was the sound of water that Merry heard falling into his quiet sleep. Water streaming down gently and then spreading irresistibly all round the house into a dark, shoreless pool. It gurgled under the walls and was rising slowly but surely. I shall be drowned, he thought. It will find its way in, and then I shall drown. He felt that he was lying in a soft, slimy bog, and springing up, he set his foot on the corner of a cold, hard flagstone. Then he remembered where he was and lay down again. He seemed to hear, or remember hearing, nothing passes doors or windows save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. A little breath of sweet air moved the curtain. He breathed deep and fell asleep again. As far as he could remember, Sam slept through the night in deep content, if logs are contented. Can I just say that's one of my all-time favorite lines in the entire book?
That is one of the first ones that I realized was a joke when I read this as a teenager. Because Tolkien's humor is so dry that sometimes you miss it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love
this
that.
one I remember reading as a kid and thinking, that's hilarious. Yeah.
That really is funny. It makes you smile. And it's just so Sam, you just, it seems like Sam is almost immune to this sort of stress and worry and concern. I don't know if it's a simple-mindedness or his ability to kind of drop and sleep anywhere.
Maybe, yeah.
Though when he was sleeping after the elf party, he was actually faking it. So
that's true. Well, and remember, he was the one who was unaffected or almost unaffected by the sleep spell in the forest too.
That's true. He was the one who stayed.
I wonder if there's some connection there.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
I don't know.
So here, of course, instead of the sounds, the tip-tap squeak, and that he's back in the willow, Merry is feeling the water rise up, and he's afraid that it's literally going to drown him in his home or in where he is. Before he wakes up and realizes that he's safe, and he remembers the rest of Goldberry's reminder. Really just a neat moment.
Yeah.
And I won't mention the fact that my garage has been leaking and I felt like the water was gurgling under the walls and I felt like my stuff shall be drowned, including my booth perhaps. But
yeah, I'm glad it was not.
I'm glad it was not so far. Yeah.
Interesting that Pippin gets that Pippin remembers half of it and then Merry remembers the other half.
Yes. I thought that was so interesting.
There's a continuity to that.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it, but it's fascinating.
I don't know what to make of it either, but I think it's that, Goldberry's line and the rest of Goldberry's line, both of them seem to actually hear it. They don't just recollect the words. Yeah. They seem to hear it in their memory. I think that's
true.
Just speaks more to the magical power, really, if you will, of Goldberry.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, that wraps up for tonight's discussion. But be sure to join us again next week as Tom gives the hobbits a brief history of the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs.
I read that book. Stephen Hawking, wasn't it? No.
Brief history of the Old Forest and Barrow Downs?
Yeah, that's the one. That'll be a good way to cheer the hobbits up before their journey to Bree, right?
Absolutely. Perk them up, make them happy, looking forward to their journey.
Nice, happy story. Some fun stuff to look forward to.
Yeah.
No, seriously, before we get to Barliman's Bag, we do want to give you a brief reminder about the fellowship of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been listening lately, you've heard us talking about how close we were to our next goal of setting up a Discord server. Well, it turns out that our listeners really can't get enough of our private humiliation. We hit that goal, and we should have the Discord server set up very soon, possibly by the time this airs.
Yeah, that's the plan. But to keep our embarrassment amongst friends, the Discord server is going to be limited to our patrons at the Gift of Gondor level or higher. So do you want to listen in live during an episode recording? Hear all the stuff that doesn't even make our blooper reel? Hear a new episode before, like a month before it releases? Then be sure to visit patreon.com/prancingponypod, where we'll have information about how you're going to get access. Of course, you'll also get all sorts of other goodies like exclusive content and PPP swag.
And if you're looking for a new Tolkien book, check out the official library pages at our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we've put together a set of links for our listeners to all the books we've ever mentioned on the show, Tolkien-related or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wouldn't mind posting a review on iTunes, we'd be grateful for that. That increases our visibility. That means more new listeners, more great questions for Barliman, more discussion on social media, and a more lively Tolkien community.
Now, it also helps if you share us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, wherever there are Tolkien fans. Now, with that, it's time to see what old Barliman has in the mailbag for us tonight. Shawn, what do we got?
Okay, well, first up, Barliman's got a rush delivery from patron Ed P. in Fairfax, Virginia.
Ah, Ed.
Ed wrote in saying, and this is kind of a long one, so stick with me here.
Okay.
Here's a word nerdery question, he said. Inspired by a bumper sticker I saw recently on a car ahead of me in a traffic jam. Where I do most of my best thinking, I gotta say.
Yeah, always.
At the bridge of Khazad-dûm, Gandalf says, "You cannot pass," he said. "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udun. Go back to the shadow. You cannot pass." That's in the book.
Right.
In the movie, Gandalf says, and I'm not going to do Ian McKellen, "You cannot pass. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udun. Go back to the shadow. You shall not pass." And Ed did, of course, include the exclamation points, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Ed says, of course, it was the epic but non-canonical "You shall not pass" that I saw on the bumper sticker, as well as on so many T-shirts and posters and in videos and parodies.
Mm-hmm.
"You shall not pass" has become part of the culture.
Okay.
What is the difference between Tolkien's "You cannot pass" and the movie's "You shall not pass"?
Interesting. Well, Ed goes on, actually, having done some of the grammatical work for us. Apparently, he wants to answer his own questions before we do. From the website,
He's very good at it.
He is very good at it. From the website writingexplained.org, can is an auxiliary verb, sometimes called a helping verb or a modal verb, and is used to denote physical or mental ability. It derives from the Old English kunnen, which means to be able. From the OED website discussing shall versus will, the traditional rule is that shall is used with first-person pronouns, I and we, to form the future tense, while will is used with second and third-person forms, you, he, she, it, they. For example, I shall be late. They will not have enough food. However, when it comes to expressing a strong determination to do something, the roles are reversed. Will is used with the first person, and shall with the second and third. For example, I will not tolerate such behavior. You shall go to the ball. Shall is an example of emphatic future tense, which denotes purpose, duty, or obligation. So, what are we to make of book Gandalf saying, "You cannot pass"? Seems to mean you are physically incapable of passing. Now, is that correct? And film Gandalf's "You shall not pass" seems to mean that Gandalf has a strong determination to prevent the passage of the Balrog. I think that this is Ed talking again, still, I should say. I told you it was a long question. I think that when the writers of the film changed cannot to shall not, they improved on Tolkien's language and specifically improved upon it in a word nerd way. What say you?
Well, Ed, thank you, first of all, for doing a lot of the grammatical legwork for us. I'm not really sure that I can add too much to the research that he's already done on the differences between can and shall. I can add a little bit. I know from the perspective of the etymology of the two words, he is correct. Can derives from Old English kunan, which actually meant to know. Mm-hmm. And one of the specific meanings of that, just like we use to know the verb know today, one of the
Uh-huh.
specific meanings is to know how to do something.
Is that also the root for cunning by any chance? That
Probably.
sort of like that sort of
Yeah.
knowledge, that
Yeah, it probably
specialized
is.
knowledge. Yeah.
I'm fairly
Cleverness.
certain it is. Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be. And I know it's the root of things like my ken, like something is beyond my
Oh, yeah,
ken.
yeah. It's beyond
So
my
yeah,
knowledge,
it probably is
right.
cunning as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But one of the specific meanings was to know how to do something, which,
Mhm.
that does imply ability. And that's how it took on this very specific meaning of to be able to do something.
Right.
On the other hand, shall derives from Old English shall, which means to owe or to be under obligation to do something. So
Yeah.
there is a very clear divide in the shades of meaning between those two words, as Ed said. In the book, it really does look like Gandalf is saying, you are unable to pass. Whereas in the movie, he is saying, you are obligated not to pass. You must not pass.
Right. Well, now right away we can hear how the second one does sound stronger, more forceful. You are unable to pass could be a simple declaration of fact, whereas you must not pass suggests that Gandalf has authority over the Balrog to forbid it from passing. Now, it's an important idea, dramatically speaking, to show Gandalf the little old wizard as having power and authority over this gigantic demon of shadow and flame. So it's not surprising that this is the version that has become part of the culture, as Ed says. But is it an improvement on the book?
It's a good question. I mean, I will admit that it is hard for me because I am such a fan of Tolkien. I'm such a fan of the book. It is hard for me to say that anything is an improvement on the words in the books, but I do see where Ed is coming from, and I agree that it adds to the dramatic impact of the scene for sure. But I do think that Tolkien always had his reasons for using the words that he did. So rather than simply saying it's an improvement or simply saying that you cannot pass is, I don't know, less dramatically effective or something than you shall not pass, I'm kind of interested in seeing if we can figure out why Tolkien might have chosen you cannot pass instead of you shall not pass or you must not pass or something. And I think I might have an explanation. I think Tolkien might actually be saying that the Balrog is literally unable to pass the bridge. Now, of course, there doesn't seem to be anything physically preventing it from passing, but there is a little snippet of dialogue in an early draft of the scene published in The Treason of Isengard, which made me look at this a little bit different way.
Sure.
In that early version, Gandalf actually says, instead of all that about the secret fire and flame of Udun, he says, I am the master of the white fire. The red flame cannot come this way. Now,
Okay.
is he saying that his white fire will actually prevent the red fire of the Balrog from crossing? I don't know. If we compare that to the language in the final version, is Gandalf saying that a flame of Udun cannot physically pass a servant of the secret fire? Maybe. And if that's true, and if Gandalf is the only person there who knows that, who has that knowledge that the Balrog is physically unable to pass, that does strike me as authoritative because it gives a hint of Gandalf speaking from, having this knowledge and wisdom that other characters don't possess, including the Balrog. I know it's not as powerful dramatically speaking, and I can see why Peter Jackson and team changed it, but
Sure.
I think that might be what Tolkien was getting at.
Yeah.
So while I'll agree with Ed that the movie's You Shall Not Pass moment has an awesomeness that the book's You Cannot Pass, arguably doesn't, and it does make movie Gandalf sound really tough, really authoritative.
Oh, yeah.
I think book Gandalf is just simply stating the facts. The Balrog is unable to get past him because he's a servant of the secret fire. And I think that's pretty awesome, too.
I do, too. I mean, either way, it's better than, please don't pass. Pretty please, Mr. Balrog, with sugar on top. The physical appearance of the please makes no difference. Sorry. I digress.
Oh, man.
Anyway, I agree with you regarding the intentionality of Tolkien's language and what it means here. He isn't saying, you, Balrog, you, wingless Balrog, are under an obligation to not pass, like he's in a no passing zone with double yellow lines in the middle.
Yeah.
He's saying, you are unable to pass because my power is superior to yours. So, yeah, that's why.
And if you're not sure about that, try and fly over me, buddy.
Yeah, you can't fly over me with vestigial wings, and you certainly can't fly over me with metaphorical wings. Try that. Try that.
Yep.
Come on, try me, cannot pass. Because, of course, we all know that if the Balrog had wings, of course he could pass.
Yeah, he could pass right over.
Yep. So, all right. Well, our second question tonight, which hopefully will lead to a little less digression, comes from Jonathan L., who asks, Oh, boy. Well, this isn't going to lead to less digression. Why do you think they took Tom Bombadil out of the movies? He was a great character in the book. Well, yeah, he certainly is. And that is one of those questions about the films that we see asked all the time in forums and Facebook groups and everywhere else online.
Yeah, and fortunately for us, it's a pretty easy question to answer if you know where to look, because every filmmaker to adapt The Lord of the Rings has been asked this question in interviews, probably more times than once. So you can actually find some of their responses online if you look for interviews and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing Jonathan and most people out there are probably thinking primarily of Peter Jackson's movies, so we can start there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 1998 interview that Jackson did for the website Ain't It Cool News, which is still available online. Jackson was asked by the interviewer whether he planned to include Tom Bombadil, and the interviewer noted that both Ralph Bakshi's animated film and the BBC radio drama had cut Tom out. Jackson's response was basically this. He said, "At this point in time, Bombadil is out." Now, that was 1998, before the movies came out, of course.
Mm-hmm.
"The main reason is not just time or pace, but one of simple narrative focus. The Bombadil sequence has so little to do with Sauron or the Ring, it is difficult to justify the screen time. It simply doesn't give us any vital new information. A very simplest rule of thumb that I use in movie storytelling is to try and further the story with each new scene."
Did he say try and further the story with each new scene? Did he really say that? Because all I'm thinking is it's too bad he didn't live by that mantra when it came to the Hobbit films. I mean, I'm fairly sure the Keely Tariel scenes, or really any scene with Alfred, pretty sure those didn't further the story with each new scene. But I digress.
Well,
and,
yeah.
It was like 20
Maybe
years
the story
later,
he
so.
was trying to tell,
Yeah.
But
yeah. Anyway. I shouldn't have gone there, but that quote echoes the response given by Ralph Bakshi when he was asked the same question. Now, there's a 2003 blog post by journalist Jim Korkis, who interviewed Bakshi over 20 years earlier when his animated adaptation of Lord of the Rings came out. He quoted Bakshi as saying, "Tom Bombadil was dropped because he didn't move the story along." Well, sounds like Brian Sibley and Michael Bakewell, the writers of the BBC radio drama, made the same decision for the same reason. According to a 2008 review of the dramatization on TolkienLibrary.com, old Tom Bombadil was left out mainly because he has no impact on the general plot.
Yeah, so there you have it. In all three cases of the major adaptations of The Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil was cut because he doesn't really have an impact on the overall plot. Now, of course, we as readers or viewers may disagree with that, and we've talked before, thinking back to one of our questions after Nightfall, I think it was episode 98.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how Tom has a really profound impact on the Hobbit's character arcs. We'll be talking in future episodes about what Tom may represent to the legendarium as a whole. I've certainly seen the argument that Tom needs to be there so Merry can get a barrow blade, which he needs later on.
Yeah.
I've seen that lots of times. But for people making movies, he just doesn't do enough to move that plot forward to justify having him there, especially when having him there means added running time and added production cost.
On that topic, the topic of production cost, I'm always reminded of Tom Shippey's comment in his lecture about the movies. And man, I love this. He talked about how writing The Lord of the Rings cost Tolkien absolutely nothing. And here's a quote from that. And I will desperately try to do it without a Tom Shippey impression, which is really hard to avoid. "How much did it cost Tolkien to write The Lord of the Rings? Well, he used to scrounge paper from old examination scripts, so I don't think that cost him very much. He used to write in fountain pen, and it's my belief that he filled it up at the college inkwell, so the ink didn't cost him anything. So what were his expenses? What is a professor's spare time worth? Well, we're in a position to tell you that. It is worth absolutely nothing."
I remember that.
Oh,
and
it is. I just hear his voice.
Hilarious the way he delivers it. Yeah.
Oh, comedy gold. And he's right. The cost was minimal.
Was minimal for Tolkien. Yeah. Yeah. But Shippey even points out, in contrast to that for Peter Jackson, his costs were constantly rising.
Yeah.
And, remember, he's making a major motion picture that is expected to make money for its producers. He has to worry about return on investment. Adding Tom Bombadil would mean a lot of added costs. There's another actor he's got to hire and have on set. 2, if he includes Goldberry. There's more sets. There's more special effects. There's more film.
Yeah.
For, an additional, maybe 20 or 30-minute sequence in an already 4-hour movie. And none of that is going to further the story, according to the filmmaker. Yeah, I guess he did cut it. I can understand that. And even if I'm not happy about it, I can understand why that's just a reality of filmmaking.
True.
And I'll be honest, I mean, as much as I have come to love Tom Bombadil, I don't miss him that much when I watch the movie. And yeah, I think the movie, works well enough without him in
As a
that
movie,
part of it.
yes.
Yeah, as a movie. And frankly, I think I'd rather him not be there at all than have the filmmakers try to do Tom Bombadil and not do it right,
And that's definitely true. I mean, I would love to see a good adaptation tackle Tom and Goldberry, but the truth is they're very hard characters to get right. And my feeling is that if you don't get them exactly right, you're going to get them very, very wrong indeed. There is no middle ground. Well, they didn't quite get this character, You might say that about Aragorn and say, well, he was a little dowdy. He was a little, he didn't have the same kind of kingly bearing.
Yeah.
But they mostly got him. No, there would be no middle ground. If you don't get Tom and Goldberry exactly right, it's going to be a disaster.
It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be
truly ridiculous.
It would be a disaster for the movie. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Because people would just come right out of the film. Your secondary belief is gone. Yeah. No, it would have been disastrous. And you said ridiculous, which is a great word because that's exactly what it would be. The two characters would be too easy to ridicule if they weren't done right.
Yep.
It would be so hard to do a character in that medium with a sort of sing-songy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Boy, that would be.
And that's what mainstream audiences would do if it wasn't done perfectly. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine the memes? Oh, goodness. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Please, though, be sure to join us again next week when we explore more of the enigmatic Tom Bombadil.
Not that we can promise any conclusive answers, but we'll have some fun speculating. Folks, thanks again for listening, and thank you for making our common room on Facebook such a fun place to be. We want all of you to be a part of this conversation, and it does not stop when the episode ends. See the comments, questions, corrections, and more on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
And as always, a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, and Chad in Texas. Thank you all very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your ring-a-ding-dillos to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get them into our next show. I'll make Shawn sing those. Well, however long we've had, it's still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.